All right, we have Senator John Whitmire here, folks. We have the President and CEO of Texas Chemical Council, Hector Rivero, here. We have the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Hurry, here. And we have the newest icon, I almost said idol, Charlie Jenkins from Port Houston. Come on up, guys. We're gonna go and get started here. This panel is going to be a little different than other panels we've done. We want to talk today about each of their organizations and how those organizations impact economic development. Hector obviously represents the Texas chemical industry. The senator represents Texas government. So we want to know, what is Texas government doing so we can continue to have a booming economy? Bob, you've been all around the economy, and just not here in Houston, but world. And Charlie, we couldn't do it without Port Houston. So we want to know how each of those organizations do something for the economy. So I promise to get through this quickly. Senator, I am going to start with you. You are the Dean of the Senate, so I'm going to give you that honor. And I guess go ahead and tee up the topic. What are the key things that you and the Texas legislature have accomplished through the years to keep the Houston Ship Channel area as an important supply chain for the region, the U.S., and the world?
Well, thank you, and thank you to the Alliance and everyone here today. It's a very timely topic. The legislature, largely since I went in 1973 as a young state representative, have mostly left the port alone and recognized local control, which in recent years is kind of a fading doctrine, but when I got there it was strongly enforced and recommended, local control. So we've done well with less government. We only meet every other year. And when I got there largely in 73, it was still a rural state. Austin was about 300,000 people. It was largely state government and the University of Texas, and now, of course, it's taken off as well as the state in the Gulf Coast area. So I will spend some time today talking about how we've got to continue to prepare for our growth with our infrastructure, our economic development, our diversity, and certainly public safety. So I think I will emphasize we're all in this together. I would suggest to you, nothing happens in Austin by accident. So that's the reason you need the trade groups, the Chemical Council, oil and gas industry, and certainly industry itself. So I'm excited to see the coming together today of stakeholders. You need to be involved. We just got out of a special session, and then, of course, the impeachment. We'll probably be back in Austin in about a week on school finance. I think we have to recognize everything that we talk about in Austin and in local government affects industry, our workers, and certainly the investors and the employees. So thank you for inviting me. That's a long answer to saying, what has the legislature done? Good business climate. People have discovered us, and they're coming in large numbers, so we must be ready.
Senator, thank you. I appreciate that. And that wasn't a long answer. That was right on target. Hector, the senator's already acknowledged it. Just coming off of a pretty tough session, a special session, and of course the impeachment. But I'd like to have you talk to this group a little bit about what are some of the key things that the council was able to accomplish through the legislature.
Sure. Thank you, Dennis, and great to be here. This was a critically important legislative session. As many of you know, for the last 13 years or so, we've seen an incredible amount of investment within the petrochemical industry, over $85 billion of new announced investment in Texas. More than half of that has already been built out. There's still some being built out. And there's a reason that our industry has been coming here, and that's because we've had the resources that we need that are critically important for the success and competitiveness of our industry. And it's things like low-cost electricity. It's things like water. It's things like a skilled and educated workforce. It's great transportation infrastructure, whether it's marine, rail, road, or pipe. And those things are critical, and Texas has always been really good about that. It's good tax policy. All of those things were touched by the legislature this session in a very important and meaningful way. The legislature spent a great deal of time, Senator Whitmire and the legislature spent a great deal of time dealing with grid reliability to make sure that the lights don't go out. You know, we've been living this. We're all used to turning the faucet and the water coming out, turning the light switch on and the electricity turning on, the lights turning on. Well, ever since Winter Storm Uri, we think about it a little bit differently. And so the legislature has been thinking about that as well. So meaningful legislation to ensure that we have new dispatchable thermal generation is critically important and important from a competitive standpoint for industry. A new funding mechanism for a water fund, that's going to be on the ballot in November, critically important. There's going to be tax relief that's been offered by the legislature for homeowners and for businesses. That's also going to be on the ballot in November, critically important. An important bill to fund community colleges and make sure that they have outcomes-based funding so that they're tied with the employers and they're providing the skilled workforce that are in high demand by the employers in their communities. So those are just some of the things that were critically important that were passed by the legislature, and I'll return the balance of my time.
Well, actually, I'm going to do a quick follow-up with you. Is it an overstatement to say Texas petrochemical drives the Texas, U.S., and world economies?
Well, there's no question. Energy is the state's largest economy. If you take oil and gas industry and petrochemicals, it is over a third, close to half of the state's economy and half of the state's workforce. And so it's critically important. We're fortunate, having worked in other states, we're fortunate that we have a diverse economy. We have high tech. We have other forms of manufacturing. But our bread and butter has been the energy sector. And Houston is home to the largest energy sector in the entire country. And the petrochemical industry is critically important, all the downstream. 10 refineries, over 150 chemical plants here in the greater Houston area. It drives our economy. It's going to drive the city of Houston. And I know that Senator Whitmire is very attuned to that in the things that he's doing when he's talking about his run to be Houston mayor.
Thank you. You teed that one up. Let me go quickly to Bob. Bob, two-parter. You've traveled on a lot of trade missions, so you have met with our international partners. How do they view Houston? That's the first part of it. And then the second part is, what's the importance of Houston, Port of Houston, as well as the private business and industry in Houston to the world economy?
Well, I would say this. Houston has very much emerged over the last 10 or 20 years as a truly global city, a city that's thought of among maybe 30 or 40 other cities around the entire world that are really interconnected, part of the global economy. People know each other, the personal relationships, the business and trade relationships. When I travel around the world, I don't spend a lot of time talking about who we are, where we are. I mean, we're on everyone's mind these days and have been for quite some time. A lot of that's driven just by the strength of the Houston economy and the fact that this is a community that really favors international investment. And when we talk about the petrochem industry or any other industry, it's not all just domestic companies, right? We have a lot of international investors here in Houston. In fact, if I look at the partnership today, the wins we've had this year in Houston, investment in Houston, about 65% have been international companies investing in Houston. So that's skewing towards international companies coming here, which is really reflective of how we're positioned, how well we're respected, is really pronounced at this point. And it also very much relates to the fact that we have the port and the infrastructure here. Our port, again, is well known. We always cite these statistics, number one in tonnage and number one in movements, and just an incredible asset for this city. But there's another aspect, it's another way of looking at it. If you look at the origin of goods that are exported from the U.S., you can actually attribute goods to their point of origin. And you all may know this, the Houston Metro is the number one origin of goods for exported goods in the United States. Has been now for a number of years. We have an export-driven economy. The port is obviously bidirectional. We have a lot of stuff coming into the port, but the fact is that we're a major export hub. Petrochem, of course, plays a huge part in that, whether we're talking about value or tonnage. So we're in great shape. I think the world is watching Houston right now from the standpoint of our traditional strengths, energy, petrochem, and then how we're emerging as a leader in this new field that we call the energy transition. And whenever I say energy transition, I'm quick to say, hey, we're going to need energy abundance. We need low-cost, reliable energy for decades to come at an ever-increasing level. And we know that hydrocarbons are going to be a key part of that. Anyone's model today will still show that the demand, global demand for hydrocarbons is going to grow at least over the next decade. So when we talk about this, we say, hey, we need energy abundance, but we buy into this idea that we've got to reduce the carbon intensity. We've got to get to a lower carbon future. We got to get to net zero, even though, frankly, no one in the world knows how to get to net zero, but we agree that we need to get there. So the whole world is paying attention right now to Houston because we're kind of the bellwether. We were seen as kind of the traditionalists until 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Now, fortunately, we're being seen as leaders, and the international conversation has shifted very quickly to how do I get a position in Houston? If this is where it's happening, if this is where the energy transition is being engineered and financed and executed, how do I be part of that? And a lot of that's going to, again, be centered around the port, right? What we're making along the port is going to be key to that.
Well, I actually think that needs a hand. Come on, that's an encouraging message. Bob, thank you. Charlie, again, congratulations. What an honor, to get the Icon Award. But let me focus on business quickly because I know you'd prefer that. Can you tell us a little bit of how the port's operations and growth impacts the Houston economy as well as the regional and national economies? Bob kind of led you into that.
Yeah, I just want to say ditto what the chairman said, ditto what the three of them said, and not bore you with the same answer. But Dennis, I'm going to twist it a little bit. Bob made me think of something. We're number one. I don't think a lot of people understand what that is. The gap between us and number two is bigger than 92% of the U.S. ports. We're just not number one. We're significantly number one in the United States. A couple other bragging points for the community, and this is the port at large, not the port of Houston that I work for, the government agency. We handle more cargo on a year on the water than the entire state of California. They're about 85% of our size due to the federal statistics. The entire state of Florida is like 37% of the size of the port of Houston at large. So this is not just a snowball, it's an avalanche, and it has done great things. And it's really up to us to keep that going and let our forefathers or the people that follow us have that same ability to develop and grow. So when you ask me, what do we need to do, what can we do, it's about we have Project 11. It's named really simply, it's the 11th rodeo. There's going to be a 12th. We're already thinking about that. We're already working on the development, and it's simple. We need to do what is meeting market demand and helping to facilitate growth, and then we've achieved our mission. I hope I answered your question. I know I diverted there because I wanted to explain the difference between 1 and 2 for the country.
Yeah. No, I do appreciate that. We could dive into a lot of details, but let's save that for a little bit later. Senator, let me go back to you. One of the greatest needs, and I know you're aware of this, for the Ship Channel Bay Area is improved infrastructure, whether that's roads, bridges, utilities. How successful were you or, the legislature in finding funding for infrastructure development that will continue to help this region grow?
I didn't mention a while ago that what the legislature did last session was sunset a TECQ, which came out, I think, as reasonable as anyone could expect. All the panelists have pointed out we've been discovered and we are booming. And I would suggest how Houston goes will depend on the port, our other great asset, the medical center. And I constantly tell the leadership in Austin, how Houston goes is how the state of Texas will go. So what we have to do is look at that infrastructure. We've got to make sure transportation is available. One of the worst things that could have happened would have been the suspension or prevention of the 45 expansion north of downtown. We didn't discuss enough how that was tied to the port traffic. So we've got to continue to have TxDOT with a viable, predictable income stream, which they have. We do have to look, and the legislature addressed electric vehicles, which are being encouraged by the national picture and realize that we're not getting gasoline tax from that. So we've got to monitor that revenue stream very carefully. So I think just a lot of planning. We have so much going for us, but we've got to stress the infrastructure. I think just basic quality of life services for the greater Houston area has to be addressed. We not only want people to work here, but we want people to live here as well. In the Houston city limits, you find so many people that work there, but then go to the suburbs either for education or public safety or other quality of life issues. So I just think we've got to realize whether we live in Houston or not, the greater Houston area has to unite. And as I said earlier, nothing happens by accident. Elections matter. So we've got to all be involved, support our trade groups. I think the port has shown great stability in recent years. I've been involved and actually sunsetted the port in previous years. Actually, John Ray Harrison, about 30 years ago, got me to put a Pasadena member on the panel. So it's really something to be proud of. The governance of the port itself is one of our strengths right now, and Austin recognizes that. There's been some discussion at the state level, would you put all the ports under one commission to get maximum resources and coordination, collaboration? No, I think Houston is doing a fine job. Corpus Christi, Freeport, others have unique service areas, and so let's don't mess with something that's working that well, and that's generally what the legislature did last session and ought to do forward. When you look at the success of previous panelists and the industry representatives, as Bob said, we're where everyone wants to be. The friendly business climate, low tax, people are moving here. The U-Haul trailers, there's no question, the data will show they're coming out of California. The destination is here. But I will emphasize, we've got to be prepared with infrastructure, quality education. You want an educated workforce. We've got some improvement to do there. So there's just a lot of things that are exciting, but we can't just rest on our laurels. We've got to be prepared. And there's some folks that would not have us go forward. There's some folks that would alienate some of us, and certainly the industry, punish them for their success. So thank you for bringing this. We need more conversations like this. You've got to be involved at every level of government because nothing happens by accident and elections matter.
I like that message as well. Thank you, Senator. Hector, he's kind of outlined a little bit of what I was going to ask you. What is it that your members are looking for? What elements makes this a good business environment that attracts Petrochemical?
Two words, certainty and predictability. You heard earlier today from Chevron Phillips Chemical that just committed $8 billion investment up in Orange County. We've had similar large investments here. These companies will not invest in a state where they don't have assurances that you're going to have a predictable and regulatory climate and environment, one that's protective of human health and the environment, but one that is fair and is science-based. You want to make sure that you have adequate water supply and that you have a plan during drought situations. You want to make sure that you have uninterruptible, reliable electricity so that you can run these plants. You want to make sure that you have a pipeline of skilled workforce, so you need that. And it's critically important that our state and local governments are aligned in support of those aspects that are critical for our industry. And it's critically important, Senator, that whether it's the city of Houston or Harris County and the state of Texas, we need all of our aspects of government working together to make sure that we can support the industry that has been able to grow and drive our economy and create the jobs.
Thank you, Hector. Bob, I'll come back to you. We heard from you as well as from Charlie some nice statistics about the port and its impact. I've known you for over 10 years now. How has that changed in those 10 years? How is it different now, the impact from the Houston Ship Channel region to the greater Houston economy?
Well, let me answer that. I'm going to step back just for a second, though, and echo this point. We all love this region because we have a growing economy, a growing population, and I always say growth is what creates opportunity, but growth requires infrastructure. So we haven't lost the consensus for growth. We haven't lost the consensus for opportunity, but it seems like we've lost the consensus for infrastructure, as if you can have growth and opportunity without infrastructure. So we find ourselves at the partnership spending countless hours, weeks, months, and years convincing some individuals that we need infrastructure. And the I-45 project, John, was a great example. We lost 2 years on that project because some key elected officials decided that we didn't need that infrastructure. And that's what we can't afford to have. We run too fast in this city. We do too much to get bogged down for 2 years on an issue like that. We eventually got through it. The project's moving forward. It's going to have real benefits here for the east part of Harris County and as well as the rest of the region. But that's just an issue to be mindful of today. Of course, one thing that's changed over the years is that, well, let's talk about the container aspect of the port. I mean, I think in some respects, our port was a tonnage-based port for many, many years. I mean, we were always proud of winning that statistic on tonnage. But increasingly, the value of goods moving through the port has caught up, and a lot of that's containerized. And the fact that now the Houston port has really emerged as one of the leading container terminals, I mean, we picked that up. That means we can talk to almost anyone, anywhere in the world now about trading with Houston, because a lot of that trade is going to be in a container. And, we've taken advantage of the fact that other parts of the country have had their issues, labor issues, infrastructure issues, while we've continued to grow. And I give all the credit to the port, because you have invested, built a business, maintained a model. But that's changed our conversation a lot at the partnership now. Trade and logistics and warehousing, if you look, a lot of the growth in Houston over the last few years, a lot of these investments have been of that nature. And I will occasionally someone will challenge me and say, Bob, why do you get so excited about another 1 million square foot facility on the east side of town, or perhaps now on the far west side of town? And I say, frankly, because each one of those facilities typically involves somewhere between 200 and 400 jobs. And those jobs pay, I'll say, $15 to $20 an hour. That's not the highest wage jobs in the region, but every one of those people who gets those jobs feel like this is the best job they've had. And it becomes a stepping stone for them in their lives to do something even better. So I'm very proud of the fact that this city is becoming a logistics hub in a way we've never been before. And that is very much due to the port. Almost all this material is coming up through the port, and now it's being distributed not across maybe the whole country, but across the whole center part of the country. And that's creating jobs here in Houston.
Super. Thank you. I know you can't travel any of our circular highways without seeing warehouses, so we know we're a hub now. Charlie, Chairman Campo earlier, gave us a little bit of an update on Project 11. You mentioned it. If you want to share more, you can now. If you don't, then I'll just ask you, what assistance does the port need from our state and federal leaders, as well as the local leaders, to continue your growth path?
Man, that is such a good question. I want to copy Hector. Consistency, predictability, that helps a lot. But, frankly, it's so multifaceted. There's so many different sides to the port. The recognition of the importance of security, the safety, the environmental alignment for societal needs, always getting better, the infrastructure. The port isn't just one thing. It's part of the city. So it takes all aspects of government to help support. I think we're very fortunate at, working from the top down. From the federal side, we have a very committed delegation. From the state side, and with champions like Mr. Whitmire here, and what he said about the ports are different. Let's keep local control. Thank God. I wanted to stand up and clap when you said it. We have invested billions of dollars in our state for our regional economy, and it would hurt to have that be used, that was built by the local for others to some degree. So, and we're different. Dennis, I would just say what we need is good governance, consistent governance, and people with vision. And I think we're very lucky to have that, and it's a big reason for our successes.
And mo money, mo money, mo money.
Yeah, try to be a little more subtle on that, but thank you.
One thing I'd like to You should insist that your local officials get along with Austin. Houston, Harris County is suffering because we're not getting our share of state resources. We raise about a fourth of the state's revenue, and we're not getting back our share of the resource, Harvey funding, et cetera, because City Hall currently will not talk to Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick and others. Neither will the county, and that's only harming our economy and our citizens. You've got to have folks that can agree to disagree, leave politics out in the hall, and sit down and work out the best solution. And I see my good friend Larry Taylor, which reminds me, as a senator, he convinced me that the Ike Dike was a very viable concept. So we need to have the port in East Harris County protected from any future storms. It's just being prepared and protect our assets. But that cooperation between local and state government is just essential if we're going to really reach our full potential.
Senator, can I drill down on that a little bit?
Sure.
Give us a couple of examples of what you would want us, the east side, to do to have a better relationship with Houston, to have a better relationship with Harris County, and therefore with the Texas legislature.
Obviously be involved in your trade associations. That's obviously a multiplier right there. But obviously everyone here should know his state rep or state senator. I used to, years ago, when I would speak to a Rotary, I would emphasize involvement. And I would say, let's start right here and name your state rep and state senator. Well, it embarrassed people so bad, I no longer do that. But what if I did? I would hope each and every one of you have a relationship and certainly know who your representative and senator is, and certainly your local officials. What's happening in Austin is we're seeing the primaries in partisan elections play a greater role. So folks are winning their primary, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and they don't worry about the general elections. And I could give you the reason of gerrymandering and all the faults. But the bottom line is, it is what it is, currently situated. So you've got to get involved in the primary, you got to pay attention in the general election, and then stay in touch with them through your trade associations and the stakeholders. Hold them accountable. If they don't see you when you go to Austin, replace them. If you see local officials that, because one's a Democrat and Austin's controlled by Republicans, they don't talk, so what? We need to tell them to put the partisan politics aside. You do that at election day and then go to work on the problem. Bob Bullock, the lieutenant governor who in the 90s had such an influence on me, he would put 5 of us in a room and say, don't come out until you have a solution and how you're going to pay for it. Government can work, and there are projects such as a huge dredging project only government can actually do. So it's so essential as the Texas Association of Business used to have buttons that says, get into politics or get out of business. And I could repeat that because it's so accurate today. We have to not leave here talking to each other. We've got to leave here fired up to hold people accountable for their governments. And our great assets like the port and our industries are having, they're going to go as your government goes. In some of the systems, we don't have enough time to talk about Washington today, but you can still be so involved at the local level and certainly at your state government. We have a great state of Texas. People have discovered us. It's our business climate. It's our workforce. It's our climate, even though it kind of stretched the limits this summer. But there's just so much going for us, but we've got to protect that for our children and grandchildren, because as much as we have going, if we do not provide the infrastructure, the education opportunities, our community college, we're where everybody wants to be, but it won't remain that way if we don't invest and protect it and work together.
Thank you. Hector, I'm going to transition to you a little bit. One of the questions from the audience asked about what's the threat to the economy. I'm going to ask it slightly differently. We've had a great 10, 15 years. You mentioned numbers earlier. What's the next decade look like to us?
Well, I think 2 things. One, obviously, we are a little bit under threat with the current inflationary conditions that we're seeing globally. And yeah, I'll say it's recessionary conditions that exist. And it's not just in the U.S., it's globally. And that has an impact on industry. It has an impact on markets. Obviously, the Russian-Ukrainian war is having an impact on markets as well. And quite frankly, I think we're still industry, I think a lot of industries, not just ours, is struggling still to come out of the post-pandemic deal, trying to find a way to continue to rebuild the supply chain that the panel talked about today, and make sure that we can continue to have a robust workforce in a way that creates a work-life balance, but gets the job done and gets the products to the customers. And we need our state and local governments to be keenly attuned to that and make sure that we're not, that we're positioning for success going further.
Thank you, Hector. Charlie, I want to take you back to your last reply and just basically say or ask, what infrastructure is needed? Where can the port continue to build? I think, on the phone when we chatted, I said, I don't know where you have space to build and expand. So without giving away all the secrets, tell me, where are you going to expand?
Ditto what the chairman said. Now, more seriously, it's not our group. We're going to expand. We're going to be prepared for the future. We're going to be thinking about the next terminal development. But the truth is, by providing the channel infrastructure, industry is going to have the trust of the new capacity, and they're going to come up with all their ideas, how to squeeze more juice out of that tomato or apple or whatever. And the economy will keep growing. So, no, I can't talk about our development plans that aren't yet public of what we're thinking to do to be prepared for the future. I think that is a constant process all groups are working on. It will come out in the next few years. Plenty of public transparency before anything happens. But at the port, the leadership is really trying to think again. I hinted or alluded to it earlier. Not just bask in the success, realize what enabled it, and make sure we're setting up that enabling factor for the people who follow us to continue it on. And we're doing our part in that. I believe we probably spend more in master planning and investment in the strategy of the future than any other port that I'm aware of. So, look, there will be a Project 12. I believe there'll be a Project 13. I can't really say what they are, but the view is there, working with the key industry partners of what they need, and we're working towards the development of a sound strategy that can be achieved. And I think the next one will be out there within a year or so of what we're trying to achieve for the next future growth spurt.
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell the audience I tried, but no, I know you can't answer that, but I think that Senator Whitmire's comments come home there. The faith and confidence people have in Port Houston right now is going to take us through some great development projects, 12, 13, and beyond. So we appreciate that. We have a few minutes here, and I'm going to take a little bit of our liberty to let one individual up here close out, because Bob Harvey, as I've mentioned, has been around a little bit over a decade as the leader of the Great Eastern Partnership. He is going to retire. He said he is, I said, would you tell me, a little bit anxious, but certainly looking forward to it. Wants to be sure he gets everything done before December 1st, when the new CEO, Steve Kane, will come in and take his place. So, Bob, first, thanks for your leadership. I want to give you a chance to close us out in the next 3 minutes with your thoughts, reflecting a little bit to the past, but more looking to the future. What do you see for the future in Houston, and what do we as the organizations need to do to make sure that future is still bright?
Well, thank you, Dennis. It's been a great 11 years at the partnership, and I'll tell you, if you ever have an opportunity like I've had for the last 11 years to play a role in this community and to make a difference, this is a community that comes together, collaborates. By and large, it's a community where people generally want the same thing, which is what's good for the community. And it's just a lot of fun to be part of that. When I look ahead, we've got some challenges. This is a region, a city where things have typically worked. Our elected officials are typically productively engaged and on board. When you see these video clips occasionally of a New York City Council meeting or a San Francisco City Council meeting or a state of Illinois legislative session, and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm glad I don't live there. Well, we're glad we live in Houston. We have every reason to be glad we live in Houston, but maintaining this attitude in Houston that we work well together, we work productively. We expect of our elected officials that same attitude. We don't expect a lot of grandstanding. We want to see productive engagement on a whole host of important issues. And that's just so critical for Houston. It's what we've had, it's what we need. It's important in every election, it's important in the upcoming election. But the other big challenge is, if this is an opportunity city, how do we make sure it's an opportunity city for everyone, or as many people as we can possibly make it? And the challenges facing the education system in this region are real. You know, we've been working at Upskill Houston for a long time to help create a pathway. We've worked with San Jacinto College, Lee College, and all the community colleges to help create these pathways for often young people, sometimes older people, into these great jobs. We have to help people get the skills. They need to be skilled up quickly. They can't be out of the workforce for long if they're an adult. And we're making real headway. And that's going to be a big challenge going forward, because all this stuff we talk about doing on the ship channel in the next 5, 10, 20 years, they're going to need a workforce. And that workforce isn't necessarily there today, so we're going to work on that. But public education, K through 12, I will tell you, this audience, you know, we're in East Harris County sitting here in Pasadena, but this transformation of Houston Independent School District into a productive district that can meet the needs of every child in every neighborhood and give every kid a chance to succeed, this is the opportunity of our lifetime to turn around public education in Houston. It won't stop with HISD. We have other districts that need reform. But I tell you what, that's where I'm, you know, in my last 60 days on the job, Dennis, I'm spending it very much focused on how do we make HISD and then ultimately other school districts effective at giving opportunity to every young person in Houston, regardless of their neighborhood.
Wow, he actually wrapped it up in 3 minutes. Thank you, Bob. Bob, obviously, best of luck to you, to this panel. Weren't they terrific? Thank you all. Senator, Hector, Charlie, thanks.